We're very glad to have in the studio with us today Professor Mabruk Derbash, formerly of the University of Tripoli, and now, like many Libyan intellectuals and thinkers, in exile in Europe. It's fortuitous that we have Mabruk in the studio with us today, because picking up a copy of the Arab business magazine, online business magazine, this morning, arabbusiness.com, I learned two things. One, that Libya's largest oil field was shut down by gunmen last week, Al-Sharara oil field, which produces 340,000 barrels a day. In other words, the turmoil, confusion, and chaos that has existed in Libya since NATO went in and got rid of Muamer Qadafi still continues. Another look at the magazine, and I saw the headlines of other articles. Just to read them will give you an idea of what is going on. Libyan army urges residents of Benghazi port area to evacuate. Libya very close to the point of no return, UN envoy warns. More heavy fighting in Libya's Benghazi sees death toll rise to 130. OPEC oil supply jumps to highest in almost 2 years. Libyan Prime Minister accuses Qatar of sending planes with weapons to Tripoli. Libyan oil exports continue despite violence. Libya in crisis, etc., etc., etc. Now, Mabruk, when you and I first met on the streets of Tripoli several years ago, and we were walking in the city, there were two things we talked about. One was the growth of religiosity, I remember, but second, how calm the city was. We went and had coffee in a number of cafes, and then we went to a particular place where you were very open in your criticisms of the late President Qadafi to me,
right,
saying it was a joke, the country couldn't run like that anymore, change was needed. Well, change came, Mabruk,
right.
And how? So now looking back on it, it's 3 years since the NATO took Libya with its allies. What happened?
Yeah, as I remember that conversation very well. The Gaddafi personality was ruling the nation. There were so many problems. Libya was a semi-failed state, basically. There was a peace in the neighborhood. Libya, people were, going to schools and going to their jobs and going about their own business in a peaceful way. But the government was not functioning in a way that it's needed. And a rich oil country did not look like a rich oil country. It has all the resources to be a superpower. I mean, superpower comparatively with the nations around it. It has a small population. It has a high growth, and the oil was at its highest prices for many decades. So there was a lot of money being stored somewhere and it's not being used, and that shows mismanagement of wealth, basically. And mismanagement of wealth could be based on stupidity or based on corruption. So one of the two things. And it had both of those things in Libya. So there was a need for change for many other reasons. There was a tribal issues in Libya. Gaddafi's family was ruling. So that created a little bit of friction in the Libyan society as well, and it became more obvious and obvious every day, especially after the sons of Gaddafi took over a few things, unofficially, by the way. So change was in the horizon. It doesn't matter how good Gaddafi is, he was there for too long. So when you overstay your stay, you need to be kicked out somehow and somewhat. And that's what happened.
And it was, you know, the Arab Spring had begun.
Has begun, and it was contagious. Tunisia coughed, Libya got a cold, and went to Egypt, just between Libya and Tunisia. So something has to happen. You know, all the countries around you were revolting, so you have to revolt as well. The revolution was organic, but it got stolen very quickly. NATO got involved, so they brought the opposition, the Libyan opposition, who was living in Virginia in the CIA and was living in London here, and they were getting all the aid. So Western governments and Western agency needed to really get their money back now. They've been nurturing all these, you know, agents and their puppets for so long, so they need to place them in the government so they can guarantee a friendly government in Libya, friendly in many ways. So that's when the problem happened. These guys were not natural leaders, they were not revolutionary leaders, they were not part of Libya, they have not lived in Libya for over 40 years, they didn't know what Libya is, they didn't know how the situation works, and they had no loyalty to Libya.
Before we move on, Gaddafi would have had some reason to feel aggrieved at what the West did to him, because once they brought him out of the cold and embraced him,
right.
He was with Tony Blair went, as British Prime Minister, visited him in his tent. He was invited to Italy. He set up his tent in the heart of Rome. Then he went to France and, according to reports in the French media and elsewhere, gave Sarkozy a lot of money for his re-election campaign, gave money to the London School of Economics, not just to give his son a PhD, but also to help the LSE. Whether he gave any money to Tony Blair, we don't know, indirectly.
He did, yeah.
But he probably did. Wouldn't surprise me at all, because Blair is one of the greediest leaders of that period. And so suddenly all these people he's been funding and helping turn against him, threaten him, and finally NATO carries out 7 months of bombing on Libya, in which tens of thousands of people are killed, destroyed cities, and now we have this complete mess. And then they imagine they're going to introduce some form of democracy. This is true.
Yes. It's very true, and every Libyan knows that. And when Libyans went to do away with Gaddafi, they wanted a democracy as a substitution. Almost every Libyan voted, except the ones that were they're in exile in Tunisia and in Egypt. They were not allowed. But relatively it was a good experience. So, and you had most of Libyans asking for a secular government. That tells you something about the society. 80% is not a small number, and the numbers can be even higher. Suddenly the West comes in, the beacon of democracy, you know, Hillary Clinton with her government, the White House and all that, coming to Libya and telling Libyans, no, sorry, your democracy is not really good enough. Your democracy has a problem and needs to be fixed. You do not know how to practice democracy. You chose secular government, that's not good. Basically, that's how bad it looked. And people were in shock. And the result was in the second election, where almost about 15% of the population showed up. And they elected just anybody. So this is one of the issues that I think it shows how people really lost faith in democracy in Libya, how the West can mismanage something that it's still in the building stage, instead of enforcing this feeling that you really could have a democracy in North Africa, a real democracy, similar to that in the West, and you can deal with it that way. But the West is keen on having some guy in there that can control a puppet, and that's a problem. And it seems to be that this puppet now, the trend is the puppet to be one of those radical Islamic groups which have no support amongst the local population. Muslims in Libya and in North Africa do not want radical groups, do not want Muslim government or Islamic government.
But Mabruk, I agree with you, of course, that the actual mass movement which sprung up in Libya against Gaddafi was organic. There's no doubt about that. It was genuine. It was a grassroots movement.
Absolutely. The problems were real
Yes.
in Libya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in order to actually get rid of Gaddafi, you needed a 7-month bombing campaign
Right.
by NATO and Operation Mermaid Dawn,
Right.
which was French and British
Right.
troops, commandos, and Qatari ground forces,
Absolutely.
without whom Tripoli wouldn't have fallen.
Absolutely. The revolution started in Benghazi and moved on into other cities until the 20th of February was in Tripoli, where the whole Tripolian people moved and just came out in the streets. This had the blessing of most Libyan people, had the blessing of almost, even Gaddafi supporters. They just walked away and they said, we know what this looks like. This is a revolution. We're out of this. We want nothing to do with this. We're not going to go against the people. But when NATO came in, the mood changed. Completely. Tribes that were against Gaddafi, like the Warfalla tribe, for example.
Where is that?
It's right here in this city, Bin Walid. This is one of the largest tribes in Libya. This tribe, lives everywhere. This is their center, but they live everywhere. They live here. Mm-hmm. In Sirte, they live in Misrata, they live in Tripoli, large group of them. They live in Benghazi, they live in lots of places here. So, and they live in Sabha. So they have influence in a lot of situations, in a lot of places in Libya. This tribe is completely changed to be with Gaddafi after NATO came in. Because NATO to them meant 1911, an occupation of Libya again by the Italians. NATO to them meant the Christian Crusaders coming to Libya. NATO to them, so they felt that it's better keeping their own dictator than to allow some Europeans coming to Libya to rape their women and kill their women. 1911 is still fresh in Libya. The Italians killed and massacred so many Libyans, which is not very well known. So they didn't want somebody from outside, even though they didn't like Gaddafi, but they say the dog you know is better than the one you don't.
Yes.
And your own dog is, your own dictator basically is better than the invaders. So for some reason, the mood changed in Libya and everybody wanted to fight defending Libya, and it, conveniently enough, was the same position as Gaddafi. That's why the campaign took 8 months.
Mabruk.
So this is the point. This is what happened. This is what the focal point. The mood changed completely. And at that point, Gaddafi became a hero.
And Mabruk, who organized the killing of Gaddafi then, the brutal way in which he was killed?
Yeah, well, Gaddafi, according to the information we have today, he went to where he was born, in Sirte.
That's near his own tribe?
Yes, his tribe is the Gaddafi tribe, lives in Sirte and lives in Sabha. And this tribe is, it's a small tribe, so he stayed there. Most of the people in Sirte, there are many tribes in there. The Gaddafi tribe, the Warfalla tribe, I just mentioned, Farjan. There are many other tribes that are very important, but they were all loyal to Gaddafi. Not Gaddafi, but as I mentioned, they were all anti-NATO basically, and this is the term I would like to use. Anti-NATO, it just happens to be the same as Gaddafi's position. So all these people protected him here until the last moment. The information came out that the French and NATO figured out where he is, and they bombed his when he fled Sirte, when NATO forces and revolutionary troops came in there. He fled Sirte, and they captured him between Sirte and Misrata, which is right here. Mm-hmm. So they captured him somewhere in here, and they hand him over to the revolutionary troops from Misrata, and under very ambiguous circumstances, he was shot in the head. And information came out after that, of course, as well, is that Gaddafi was shot by French intelligence service officers who were on the ground, and they just want to get rid of him. And it was very understood by Libyans that Gaddafi had too many secrets against Sarkozy and Western powers that they wanted to get rid of him as a person. And it would have been just and would have been in everybody's interest that Gaddafi goes in front of a court and answers to the questions. And if he was really a dictator or murderer or whatever, have something like the Saddam Hussein, But I think the French were not interested in having a saga that goes on for 2 or 3 years that shows at the end that Gaddafi is much better than the replacement. The French intelligence service made a very quick decision, and they had so much power on the revolutionary troops at the time, and they just assassinated him.
And how do you explain that in the 3 years since the changeover took place, there is still total chaos?
Absolutely. And
I mean, Mabruk, just on a personal level, the streets you and I walk down in Tripoli, they are not there now?
Right. Well, they are there, but now they look different. I mean, the area where we were walking, now is anti-radical Islamic groups. So now street fights in there amongst
each other.
Yeah, the young kids and the neighbors have their own guns. We have fights between local residents of neighborhoods against the supposed government, de facto government in Libya, which is Al-Qaeda, of Tripoli, Al-Qaeda, because they have now different governments. You have a government in the eastern of Libya and you have a government in western.
Just show the regions then.
Yeah, so you have a government now in Tripoli here.
This is an Al-Qaeda government?
This is Al-Qaeda and Islamic Brotherhood that has connection to this city, which is Misrata, which is the capital of the Islamic Brotherhood. This is where they have their supporters in there. So this government is not recognized by the West or the world. It has all the resources and it's there in the ground, and has all the militias, the Al-Qaeda militias, the Warfala tribe, which was against Gaddafi, supported him, is a problem for Al-Qaeda and still the resistance. So you have a parliament that is finished, but it's still working, it's still getting paid.
But I was told that the parliament is now on a ship somewhere.
Now you have 2 parliaments. One is more legitimate than the other one.
The one in Tripoli?
Is not legitimate.
Is not legitimate.
Is finished, is expired, but it's still working.
Does
not want to give up power.
And the one on a ship? Is
on a ship and in Tobruk. It's the legitimate one now, and it's been just because this finished its term and this was took over, and instead of going to Tripoli to sit in the same place and to go and they were not allowed by Al-Qaeda to go in there because Al-Qaeda, which is the Islamic Brotherhood as well, lost almost all their seats they had before. The 20% I mentioned, they're not 20% anymore, went down to 5 to 7%. So they knew that they have no future in Libya, only if they use their guns, and that's what they did. So they hijacked Tripoli. They asked the parliament to come to Tripoli, the new parliament, so they can kill them or do something to them. So they did not want to go. They were scared for their lives. So they stayed in Tobruk, which is relatively safe haven for them. And it's some of it, part of this is controlled by the army, whatever it's left of the Libyan army, the one was before during Gaddafi's government. So yeah, so you have a government here that it's a parliament government, it's a new parliament, which is legitimate, everybody recognized, but you have a de facto government which is in Tripoli here. In Tripoli.
And then in Darna you have an ISIS?
And Darna you have newly ISIS Imaras, which is a new state that swore allegiance just a few weeks ago to ISIS in Iraq. So Darna is actually not Libya anymore, just geographically. It's actually part of an Islamic state, ISIS. The English term is ISIS, Islamic State, but it's not really. The Arabics call it Daesh.
Yeah, Daesh means what?
Daesh, that's what it means.
The new
state of Iraq and Syria. And this is the term it's used. The Western world uses the word ISIS. It's just convenient, and it's not really. Arabs and Muslims do not use that term, so they use Daesh.
Daesh.
And this Darna is now belongs to Daesh, which is ISIS, and it's completely out of.
So let's summarize.
Out of control.
3 years after NATO.
Yeah, 3 years
Britain and France took the country. We have Al-Qaeda de facto ruling Tripoli.
Right.
We have a Daesh stroke ISIS headquarters in Darna,
Right.
and we have another parliament in Tobruk.
Exactly. And we have an expired parliament in Tripoli as well.
Yeah.
And we have Islamic Brotherhood that is controlled and run by Turkey, you know, the Turkish Erdogan. It's almost like a joke. Erdogan.
It's a disaster.
It's a disaster. And it's run and supported by Qatar as well. Qatar is the country that is wants to take a lead, to be an important player in the Arabic world. And
To rival the Saudis a bit and Egypt?
There is no rival. I mean, they use the Islamic Brotherhood to control Egypt, not rival anybody else. But now Egypt has got rid of, in a very dramatic way, got rid of the Islamic Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Qatar has a problem even with Saudi Arabia and Emirate. So Qatar is actually now is estranged to all Arabic nations and has a problem with the Libyans, of course, is very obvious, but has a huge problem with Egypt. Almost there's no diplomatic relations between them. Has a problem with the Gulf countries, such as Saudi Arabia and Emirate, which is two superpowers. Has a problem with Bahrain, and its problem is well known against Syria and Iraq. So it's hard to find the intelligence behind their effort, other than creating chaos everywhere. Yes. So that's what they're doing really in Libya, and this is what they did in Egypt was a joke. They supported the Islamic Brotherhood, but they had no real statesman. They had and they present themselves as joke in Egypt. And the Egyptian people revolted against them very quickly, and they came down to the streets. The numbers were extraordinary, about 20 million in the street of Cairo and other cities. So basically, Qatar and Turkey play an important role in destabilizing Libya. And these groups, Al-Qaeda groups, cannot live without the money that's coming from Qatar and the weapons that come into Qatar to Misrata and Tripoli. Because now they have their own airports. They control all the airports in Libya are not functioning except Al-Qaeda airports. So if you want to go to Libya today, you have to go through Al-Qaeda. You're screened by Al-Qaeda. So they control everybody who's coming in. And the new information coming just this week that there are people from ISIS coming from Iraq and Syria to Libya to fight, to be part of the fight. Because Libya to them now, it's a very good place to build a base, you know.
But Mabruk, how do the United States justify this?
Most Libyans intellectuals have a problem with this because they have faith in the United States. I mean, it doesn't make sense for the United States to have a foreign policy that supports Islamic Brotherhoods in Libya, because it's always been United States policy, and Britain as well, that they rely heavily on their ambassadors and their intelligence service. Libya is not very important to the United States, maybe important to England and the Europeans, but the United States is nothing. They get 5% of the oil from there. 5% of Libyan oil goes to the United States. So it can be replaced by any country. That's why the Libyan file is not really, it's way in the back there. So this is my interpretation, that whatever the American ambassador says about Libya goes.
But
how evil was
Mabruk, in reality, if we are being brutally honest, Iraq during the Saddam period and Libya under Gaddafi, despite everything, were in a much better condition than they are today.
Absolutely, and
there's no doubt about that.
Absolutely, it takes a while for democracy to be inserted in a society, especially in societies that are not traditionally democratic. And this argument is completely false, because democracy is almost like a natural thing. Freedom and liberty is a natural thing in the human behavior. To be free, it's completely natural. When you are allowed to be free, you become free. Like look at Iraq since 1991, now until today, you have it's a disaster. It's like you go back to square one. Now Obama is sending troops again to fight ISIS that
they themselves helped
created.
to yes.
So, and they're not shy about the fact that, I mean, they keep lying to people that this is a problem for us, but this is your problem. You created, ISIS is killing 90% of the people it's killing are Muslims. ISIS is a problem for Muslims in the Arabic society.
It's a much bigger problem
than for the Americans.
Muslims.
And
yes.
It's been used in the West and been used in America, North America, as being the Islamic terrorism. And I mean, Muslim people are paying the price for that, and it's becoming a slogan used
So
by
Mabruk,
Islamophobes and all that. Yeah.
To conclude, there is no light at the end of the tunnel in Libya at the moment.
Well, I wouldn't say that. There's always hope. There's an activist movement now outside of Libya, also inside of Libya. So there is a second revolution happening in Libya today. This revolution, however, is going to be very slow. Al-Qaeda is very well trained. They have all the resources. They have all the money. And they have the support of the government. They have the support of the US and the Western world. This is how Libyan people see it. And these people are, so there is a local movement to fight all these powers. So it's going to take a while, but it's actually a step in the right direction. And this is the way I see it. It's very important that the West wake up and realize that they're going to lose the battle and they are on the wrong side of things when it comes to Libya. And they need to support the people. And they need at least to walk away from this and let people decide what to do with it. They cannot keep on helping Qatar and Turkey Erdogan, and the Islamic Brotherhood to flourish in Libya and to continue making people's life miserable and be a problem for democracy and people being a problem for liberty. People are very hungry for liberty in Libya. I mean, they have not lived through a democratic government ever. The Gaddafi regime it's a military regime, basically. Gaddafi was just on top of it. Yeah. So was a dictatorship, was a soft dictatorship, nevertheless it's a dictatorship. So in the quest for a real democracy, something similar to what's happening in the West, it's not perfect, no government is perfect, but at least there is room for advancement. There is room for people can say whatever they want. They can choose their leaders. They can the right person can be in the right place. There is no corruption, or less corruption. So
don't say no, because the level of corruption in Europe now is reaching a very high level.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, like you. This is why I said, you know, it's everything is in relative terms. We need a society where children can go to school without being told no. We need the society where women can go to work without being told no, you cannot. You're not allowed to work. Women can dress the way they want. We want a society where people can practice their religion without being having a problem. I mean, Libya is the Libyan people, or the Libyan is one of the society is very unique in the world. We have almost 0% Christians, for example, but in the capital, my city, Tripoli, we have 5 churches. We built 5 churches, Libyan Muslims built 5 churches in Libya just for foreigners. So when you come in, there's a Catholic church, Baptist church, Orthodox church, and 1 synagogue, by the way. So people can, and other 2 churches being built recently in the last 10 years, just so can workers and visitors to Libya can go and practice. By the way, these churches are not funded by the Vatican or anybody else, funded by Libyan taxpayers. So this is the kind of society we have, and it's a very moderate Muslim society. So it's very natural for this society to really do away with radicalism. Islamic Brotherhood it's a very foreign concept to Libya, and it's not being embraced by Libyans. So I do see something, but it's going to be a slow, and it's going to be painful, and I hope the West take this chance to really either stay away or support.
They won't support.
Right. I know.
And they won't support, but the hope is that they stay away and let Libyan people determine their own future.
Exactly.
Mabruk, thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.